Okay, we are live. Please bear with me. Just gotta get this ready. The show should have a minute or so left. I'm just trying to get this up so I can put down teams as they're called. I know a lot of people are be like, oh, these teams up top don't really matter. I think they do matter a lot. I think depending on if Duke is ranked, if James Madison is ranked, anything like that could have some serious implications. Because I'm trying to bring up chat while there we go. I think that works. So the rankings should be on any second now. Here we go. Should be on any second. I'm trying to make sure I have chat open.
How's the bird looking?
Just bear with me, guys. I'm trying to get this all ready. But like I said, these teams at the bottom of the end, if James Madison is ranked, if Duke is ranked, like all that, like that's seriously a big thing. I'm trying to make sure the broadcast isn't picked up as I'm going through this. Want to make sure I got chat open. Yeah, but I think everything's good. I'm ready. My hands are poised over the keyboard, and I'm ready to type out these teams whenever they come out. So I have to spacebar and then put it in. I will try to be as quick as possible as the rankings come out. Let me know. Again, I think it's big. If we see James Madison ranked, if we see Tulane ranked, if we see North Texas ranked, this can matter a lot if Duke is ranked, where Virginia's ranked, because depending on what happens with the ACC championship, the Sun Belt championship, all that, like it could matter on who the two last strongest conference champions are. If Duke wins, are they going to be ranked ahead of James Madison and Tulane? If not, we could see two Group 5 teams making the college football playoff, which would be crazy. We're gonna see if Miami gets any closer to Notre Dame because Miami obviously beat Notre Dame head to head earlier in the season, and they should be ranked ahead of them. We're gonna see if the committee addresses it. But I'm ready to see these rankings. Honestly, I'm hope y'all are ready too. Excited about it. I think this is a big reveal. This will be a huge revealing ranking, and then obviously it's the penultimate ranking, so it's gonna mean a lot. But this is huge to see who they have, particularly 25 through like 20, and then the top 14 are gonna be huge. Where does Texas go if they go up? So as the rankings come out, I will be putting them in, and we can then go over like what I think about it, what this means, how I had my original ranking, any thoughts y'all have, and we can go on. Yeah, and they're just chatting right now. So, but everything's on schedule, so the show has started, and we will get these rankings as soon as possible. If we want to look real quick at the rankings they had last week, Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, Texas A&M 3, Georgia 4, Texas Tech 5, Oregon 6, Ole Miss 7, Oklahoma 8, Notre Dame 9, Alabama 10. That's your top 10. Obviously, Texas A&M lost. They will fall. How far will they fall? Texas A&M lost to Texas isn't the worst. They were handily beat. It was at Texas, though. It was tough. I think they'll fall past Georgia. I think Texas Tech will jump them. I think it really becomes a question of will Oregon jump them and will Ole Miss jump them? Because they're not dropping past Oklahoma. But I could see a world where they're behind Ole Miss, they're behind Oregon, or behind Texas Tech. I don't think they're falling anywhere past that, though. I think that's the range they're going to fall into. And so I think Texas A&M will be fine at the end of the day. They won't get to play in their conference championship game, obviously. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm ready for the rankings. Like I said, it will be really telling. There's a couple of things. One, these first couple of teams. Where is James Madison? Where's North Texas? Where's Tulane? Where's Duke, if at all? Other than that, where will Texas be is another one. And then Miami and Notre Dame. Is Miami closer to Notre Dame this time? Have they changed their position? And how far does Texas A&M fall? That's really the four things I'm looking at right now. Where are these Group of 5 teams ranked, particularly North Texas and James Madison, in comparison to Duke and Virginia? Does Texas have a chance? Where does Texas go after beating Texas A&M? Does Notre Dame finally Here we go. We got our rankings. James Madison is number 25. That's big. Oh, shoot. I'm scuffing this up. North Texas is number 24. Again, I thought they'd be ranked. They were. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think Duke is going to be up here with that said. Oh, I'm falling behind. Got Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech at 22 is kind of shocking. Houston at 21, which is interesting. Tulane comes in at 20. That is huge for Tulane. Michigan at 19. Arizona jumps up to number 18. Good for them. I mean, it won't matter much, but Virginia, don't think they moved much at 17. USC at 6. We kind of knew this. Now the top 15 is going to be interesting. Where is Texas? Utah is at 15. That is kind of shocking. So that means Texas jumped at least Utah. Vanderbilt. Wow. So that means Vanderbilt's basically out. Because that means Texas jumped them, which I don't agree with. And I get it, Texas beat them. And that's where Texas is. But Vanderbilt has the better record. So does that mean Texas has a chance? I don't know yet. Rankings are still coming on. I'm finally caught up. So Texas at 13. That's huge. Texas, I still think, has a chance then with this. I'll have to go through the scenarios in my head. Go through it with y'all after this. But Texas at 13. So they jumped up a couple of spots. Like 3 spots. That's the furthest I thought they could go, and they did go that far. Miami at 12. So that means they did not jump BYU then, which is shocking. I thought Miami was going to jump BYU to give the committee some wiggle room on depending on what happens in conference championship week, whether they want to put Miami in over Notre Dame or whatever. But they're keeping that buffer of at least BYU in between them still. I would assume BYU would be the next team here. I don't want to start typing it just in case it's not BYU, but I'm almost entirely sure it's BYU. So number 11 coming up. I'm shocked. Miami, I thought with that win over ranked Pitt, I know they're not ranked anymore, but I thought that huge win, like 31-point victory over Pitt, would jump them above BYU, but their committee doesn't think so, apparently. Number 11 is BYU, like I thought. So that means it's a little more predictable now. So we would assume that Alabama, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame are these next three teams, which we think. You would assume it stays the same. So Oklahoma would stay at 8, Notre Dame at 9, Alabama at 10. You would assume, especially since Alabama barely beat Auburn. Notre Dame is at 10. So hold on. That is somewhat what I thought they would do. Now Miami's within one team away, and that's actually huge. And I will get into that why this is huge. So Alabama jumps Notre Dame, which I don't get. I thought it would just be easier to say Miami jumps BYU because they had a good game. But Alabama jumping Notre Dame after beating barely Auburn is like, I don't see why that makes sense. But to me, it's just the committee giving themselves an option depending on what happens at championship weekend. And I'll go over that after these rankings are revealed. But I assume Alabama will be next, and they are. Alabama. And so that means Oklahoma is going to be at number 8. I guess that's the committee saying Alabama is going to be in the playoff even if they lose the championship, which, fair enough, I think that's the way it should be. Alabama at 9, waiting on the show. I believe, I'm almost 100% sure it's going to be Oklahoma. I'm going to start typing it. Screw it. Oklahoma will be number 8, in my opinion. It then becomes a question of the top 7 because Texas A&M, I could see them being at number 7. That's the farthest they could drop, in my opinion. Just waiting on the show to reveal Oklahoma at 8, though. And again, I put it in. Sorry if this ends up being wrong, but I am almost 100% sure Oklahoma will be at 8. But we can get into this will be important. Miami only having one team between Miami and Notre Dame is huge. I thought they would do it the other way around. I thought they would jump Miami over BYU and keep Alabama in between them. But no, they kept BYU in between them. And so Oklahoma is number 8. 8 is Ole Miss. Which, 7 is... Oh, excuse me. 7 is Texas A&M. My bad. Sorry, it's on my phone. I can't really see, and I'm getting old. Texas A&M drops all the way to 7. Ole Miss at 6. So that means Oregon probably 5, Texas Tech 4, Georgia 3, Indiana 2, Ohio State 1. I thought Texas A&M could fall as much as to number 7, and they did. We'll talk about the implications of that, but they're still obviously firmly in the playoff. I think they're a lock, obviously. So that will be fine for them. I didn't think they'll fall past Ole Miss, though. If you look at their common opponents, I can get into that later. But Texas A&M has done better against the common opponents. I get Ole Miss's loss is better to Georgia. So yeah, Oregon's going to be 5. Texas Tech 4. Georgia 3. Sorry, I don't know how to spell, bro. I don't know how to spell for shit. Indiana 2. And Ohio State 1. Which we knew. Alright. So that is your playoff ranking. So, we can get into this real quick. Let me just go over some things real quick. Make sure everything's set up here. Okay. So let's start this from the bottom up. Let's go over. James Madison is at number 25. North Texas at 24. Iowa at 23. Georgia Tech at 22. Houston at 21. Why is this big? Because if you look at it, again, the way the playoff format is made, it's not the top 12 teams, which honestly it probably should be, but with this format right now, it's not. It's the top, you have the top 5 conference champions and 7 at-large spots. Excuse me. Now, that people just initially thought that with this ranking in mind, it was just going to be, okay, the SEC championship champion, the Big Ten champion, the Big 12 champion, the ACC champion, and a Group of 5, the highest ranked Group of 5 champion. That is not necessarily the case anymore. So the ACC could entirely be left out of this playoff. if you look at it, because the ACC championship is between Duke and Virginia. Obviously, if Virginia wins, then they're in. Virginia wins, they're in. Simple as that. But what happens if Duke were to win? If Duke were to win, look at it. They're not ranked. That leaves the door open for the champion of either North Texas or Tulane, which are both ranked ahead of Duke because Duke's not ranked at all. They're both ranked. And if James Madison was to win, then, so if that scenario plays out, Duke wins, either North Texas or Tulane wins, obviously one's going to win, and then James Madison wins. The ACC would have no team representing the playoffs unless Miami got the at-large bid. Again, another way the committee can just give themselves some room where it's like, oh, okay, we're going to give you some wiggle room right here to whatever happens. So that's, I think, a big thing to watch in the ACC championship game. We'll go over these other stuff, but James Madison, North Texas, Tulane ranked here. Obviously, Houston, Georgia Tech, Iowa, it doesn't really matter much. But Duke is not ranked at all, and they shouldn't be. I think they have like 3 or 4 losses. Surprised they even made the ACC championship, but that's how the conference record worked and stuff. So it's Virginia, Duke in the ACC championship. If Virginia wins, obviously ACC gets their conference champion in the playoffs. But if Duke wins, and if Virginia loses and Duke wins, which I don't think they will, but if Duke wins, that means the ACC is getting no conference champion. It would be the champion, either Tulane and North Texas, and if James Madison won. So that's huge. And even if James Madison didn't win, obviously between North Texas and Tulane, one of them is going to win. But between James Madison and Duke, like if James Madison lost, then you're looking at possibly where UNLV would be ranked if they won. And then if they lost, then you would assume Duke would be in. But like I don't know if the ACC gets in if Duke wins. Other than that, Michigan, Arizona, Virginia, USC, this is where it gets interesting. Utah was jumped by Texas. So they are out of the playoff at this point. I would have to imagine. I can go over the numbers. But let's see. Utah was ahead of Vanderbilt before this. But because Vanderbilt beat Tennessee pretty handily, I guess the committee says good up them. They jumped them. And Utah, I don't think will make the playoff at this point. Because if we're looking at it, let's just start from the top real quick. Ohio State, Indiana. Whoever wins that Big Ten championship will obviously be the number 1 seed, and the other team will still be in the playoff. Same thing with the SEC champion. You would imagine Alabama doesn't fall out, even if they lose. You don't think, right? So they would be in. Georgia would be in no matter what. Texas Tech is in. Let's assume Texas Tech beats BYU. Because if BYU wins, then that adds a whole nother layer to this. But Texas Tech, I would imagine, would win. So if those scenarios play out, let's just say the favorites win their conference championships. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, Virginia, and then a group of 5 champion, either North Texas or Tulane. So with that, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those 11 teams you would think would be in, right? And then you would have the group of 5 champion. Oh, no, excuse me. That's not even right. It would be up to Notre Dame because the group of 5 champion in Tulane or North Texas would be in. So that's 11 spot. And then the winner of the ACC in Virginia in this scenario would take the 12th spot. Or they would take the 11 and North Texas or Tulane would take the 12. So that means right now, and I'll just do this, these teams are safe in my opinion. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama. Obviously, if Ohio State or Indiana were to lose their conference championship, they're still in. Same thing with Georgia. Same thing with Texas Tech. They would still be in the playoff if they lost. And you would have to assume Alabama would still be in. Because the thing that I think the committee wants to make clear is that you're not going to be punished for losing your conference championship. We'll see how much that rings true but Alabama should be in, right? So Alabama's in. That's 9 teams that are for sure in, you would think. And then you have 10, 11, you have 3 spots left. So that means, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you have 3 spots left. So that means right now, and I'll just do this, these teams are safe in my opinion. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama. Obviously, if Ohio State or Indiana were to lose their conference championship, they're still in. Same thing with Texas Tech. They would still be in. So that means and one of them will be a group of 5 team. So there's really 2 spots left between these teams. So that means you would assume Texas is out. Because even if there was a world where BYU lost their conference championship and they were out, and then you get the group of 5 team, so you still have Notre Dame, Miami, and the group of 5 team get in before Texas does. So Texas, I don't think makes it. I'm surprised they brought up Texas that much. The only way Texas gets in the playoffs still, is if they take Alabama out for losing the SEC championship, which I think would be a disgrace. But if they were to do that, there would be these 8 teams in. You would have Notre Dame 9. You could see BYU 10. Well, let's say BYU loses and leaves. So they're out, which again, I wouldn't agree with, but that's the way it would be. So you'd have 8, 9, 10. That would be your 11th team, and then the 12th team would be the group of 5 champion. That's the only way Texas makes it. And just because the committee has done dumber things in the past, let me put that caveat there, because I don't know how that works and how much they will drop Alabama, if any, if they lose that game. So this is the way I see it. Obviously, Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Those are complete locks for the championship. For the playoff. That means you have 4 teams left. You would assume Alabama would be in there, win or lose. You would assume. But you don't know with the committee. You would assume, obviously, you have to get a group of 5 team in there. And you need an ACC champion. Or another group of 5 winner, if Duke were to win. So that's 3 spots taken already to 9, 10, 11. That means there's 1 spot left between these 5 teams. Wait, am I doing this right? Let me scratch it. Let me go through this again. These teams are safe. 8 teams are safe. That means there's a 9 spot, a 10 spot, 11, a 12. There's only 12 teams. So these 8 teams you would assume are safe. That means there's 4 teams outside looking in. And with this, you're not even considering the ACC champion, which is 1, and the group of 5 champion, 2. Which, again, you would assume it would be that way. Maybe it's another way where it's like, if Duke wins, then you would have James Madison and Georgia Tech or North Texas. So either way, of those 4 spots left, there's only really 2 spots left because they're being taken up by either Virginia, Tulane, North Texas, and James Madison. Some combination of those. Or even some, in a stretch of imagination, Duke or UNLV. That means there's 2 spots left. Alabama, Notre Dame, BYU, Miami, Texas. Again, you're assuming Alabama would make it even if they lose. If we're going to assume that, let's just say Alabama makes it in even if they lose. Then bang. They're in. You then have Notre Dame, BYU, Miami, Texas. Texas would be out automatically. If BYU were to lose their championship game, let's say by a lot, I could see the committee dropping them out. For sure. Because they already have Notre Dame ahead of them. It would then become a question of who gets that last spot. Is it Notre Dame or Miami? And I know a lot of fans, Miami fans, would be mad. There's really no way anyone's going to come out of this like happy, where everyone's going to be happy, because Miami fans obviously are upset. And I agree with the Miami fans. I agree with all the people that say Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame, because they should. Why play games if the head-to-heads don't matter? Like, if we're not going to value head-to-head more than just the eye test and stuff like that, then might as well just go against a bunch of weak competition and try to look good. Like, why would Notre Dame and Miami play in the first place if we're not going to respect the winner of that game? It's ludicrous to me. And then if you're a Notre Dame fan, you could see it the other way. And I would understand why you're upset, because the committee has been setting you up this whole time of having yourself ahead of Miami, especially with a buffer here. The buffer is getting smaller and smaller, but you still have a buffer of a team between them. So if it was after the conference championship weekend, BYU loses, and one more team's left, and it's Notre Dame or Miami, and Miami gets in, I mean, fair play to the committee for making the right decision, but if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're like, okay, what the heck? We've been ahead of them this whole time. Neither of us have played this weekend. Why is Miami jumping us? And that's a fair question to have, and a fair um, complaint you would have as a Notre Dame fan, and I totally get it. Um, but I could definitely see that happening. So, going over this again, let's just try to come up with scenarios. Again, I don't know how the committee is going to do this. I would think, okay, let's throw out a scenario where there is like a no questions asked. These would be the 14, 12 teams, excuse me. That would make the college football playoff. Oh, that doesn't work. Sorry, bear with me one moment. I'm not great at. I've only used this once. Let's do a scenario that would be the simplest for the committee, right? Again, I think it's huge that Alabama went ahead of Notre Dame, because if we go to the previous ranking, Notre Dame was ahead of Alabama. There is no reason why Notre Dame should have dropped behind Alabama, only for the reason that the committee has um, flexibility on what happens with this championship weekend. That's literally the only thing that I could see them doing that for. So let's go over this real quick. Let's do a scenario. These 8 teams are safe. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. They're safe whether they lose or win. So let's say Big Ten championship comes around. Indiana, Ohio State wins. Regardless, one of them is the number 1 seed, and the other team makes it to the playoff regardless as a one-loss team. Let's say Georgia loses the SEC championship game to Alabama. That means Alabama would be in, and Georgia you would think would still be in with 2 losses. There's not a world where I see Georgia dropping out of the playoff at number 3 right now, even if they lost to Alabama. Let's say Texas Tech lost to BYU. That means BYU would be in, and Texas Tech would, again, hypothetically, should still be in the playoff. If that scenario happened, and then you obviously have, let's say Virginia wins the ACC championship game, and then let's say Tulane wins their championship. You would have Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Those are 8 teams. You'd have a 9th team in Alabama because they won their conference championship. You would have a 10th team in BYU because they won their championship. And then you would have Virginia, an ACC champion. That's 11 teams. And then Tulane, Group of 5 champion, highest ranked, 12 teams. If that scenario plays out, which is very plausible, by the way, then the committee does not have to worry about Notre Dame or Miami discussion because they're just out, right? Both of them are out. So it wouldn't matter, really, who's ranked ahead of who, because both of them would be out. But that really, the only way that scenario plays out is if the upset happens, if Alabama beats Georgia, which I could see happening like 100% almost. I would almost be willing to favor Alabama in this game, just for the success they've had against Georgia in the past. And then I think Georgia's a 2.5 point favorite in that game. And then the one that would set that up is BYU beating Texas Tech, because Texas Tech already played BYU earlier in the year, demolished them, wasn't even close. So if BYU beat Texas Tech, that would be a surprise. I think they're like multiple point favorites in that game. So I definitely don't think BYU is beating Texas Tech. But that's the only thing that really needs to happen. Because even with Georgia beating Alabama, I don't think Alabama would drop out. There is a possibility where that happens, but I don't see it happening. So that's really what happens here. If BYU upsets Texas Tech, then we don't have to have the discussion about Notre Dame and Miami. If BYU does not beat Texas Tech, which I don't think will happen, then the discussion is going to be who gets that last spot, Notre Dame or Miami. Like, the committee's setting themselves up here, and they should have had Miami in front of them in the first place, because if it comes down to it, where Notre Dame and Miami are the last 2 teams that one of them is the last team in and one of them is the first team out, like, it would be a huge mistake on the committee's part if they put Notre Dame over Miami. There's just no world where that doesn't make sense. Miami beat Notre Dame. I get it. Miami's loss is not great. Notre Dame's losses pretty good to Texas A&M and to Miami. But in what world, with two teams that have the same record and who beat one of them, Miami beat Notre Dame week 1. In what world does Notre Dame get in over Miami? Like, I honestly, there's no way you can convince me otherwise. They have the same record, and Miami beat them. There's just no way Miami does not get in. If they do, I will talk about it. I will make an uproar for the Miami fans. I'm not even a Miami guy. I'm an Oregon fan. But that would be a huge mistake on the committee's part if they put Notre Dame in, especially if Miami's the first one out. Like, that's going to be huge. I guess Texas, the only way they get in, again, is if in a weird scenario where they say Alabama's out because they lost their championship and BYU's out because they lost their championship. That means you would have Oklahoma 8, Notre Dame 9, Miami 10, Texas 11. Oh, wait, that also doesn't work either. Hold up. These 8 teams are in regardless. If Alabama were to lose and be out, that's your 9th team. BYU loses out. Miami, your 10th team. That means 11 and 12 are available. The problem with that is that you would still need 2 more conference champions, and it would be, yes, Texas actually is out. Never mind. Let me make that clear. So it really comes down to this, and you would assume Alabama is in. But it will be a fun championship weekend to watch these games and see what happens. Particularly because if BYU loses, you would have to assume Notre Dame or Miami is being that last team in. I don't think it's fair necessarily to BYU if they were to be out. Because if you're looking at this right now, what would the playoff picture look like right now? Well, it would be Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech. They would have the byes. They're the top 4 teams. And assuming they won their championships. Oregon would be 5, Ole Miss 6, Texas A&M 7, Oklahoma 8, Alabama would be 9, Notre Dame would be 10, and the other 2 conference champions, Virginia, if they won, would be 11, and then Tulane, if they won, would be 12. So right now the cutoff point is BYU, and Miami are left out. Now, I see a world, again, it's a very slim chance of this happening, but for some reason, let's throw a hypothetical out there, right? Because the committee have been dodging this question and addressing this situation for a while now. And they're going to have to address it next week on Selection Sunday. Let's say, in a hypothetical, where they don't have to address it. Again, I addressed that one scenario where if BYU and Alabama were to upset, that means you have these 8 teams, Alabama, BYU, and then 2 conference champions in Virginia and Tulane, or Virginia and North Texas, or Virginia and James Madison, whatever that is. That would be your 2 conference champions. Both Notre Dame and Miami would be left out. What if I told you there's a scenario where Notre Dame and Miami both get in and everyone's happy? This is how it would play out. Ohio State, Indiana, whoever wins that game would be whatever. Those 2 teams are in. Georgia wins their conference championship. They're in. Texas Tech wins their conference championship. They're in. Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, they're in anyway. So you have 8 teams there. And then you also have, you need 2 more conference champions. So you would have either the ACC champion and the Sun Belt champion, or whatever the combination of 2 other conference champions, the highest ranked, would be in there too. That'd be 9, 10. So you have 2 teams left. What if the committee said Alabama is out because they lost, and they have now 3 losses on their resume, which would be dumb, but let's say they do it, and BYU is out because they lost their conference championship to Texas Tech, which again would be dumb, I think, but very plausible. That one more plausible than the former. With that, then, you would have 2 spots left for Notre Dame, Miami, the 2 teams who don't play during conference championship week. Just saying, that is a real possibility too. So again, I think it's crucial. And if you're a BYU fan, and you're complaining at, oh, this isn't fair, this isn't blah, 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 whatever. If you win, you're in. And, I mean, your destiny is in your hands, BYU. If you beat Texas Tech, you are for sure in the playoff. 100%. Again, I think Alabama's going to be in. It will be really interesting to see. That's going to be it for me. Unless anyone on here wants to say anything, I will respond, talk to you guys. But that's my take on this. I think it's really interesting. Let me know if you want me to do a video on just, more in depth what happens this championship weekend, who really still has a chance. I can go over it more in more depth. And that'll be it for me, guys. I appreciate it, and I'll see y'all in the next video.